He always finds it hard to control himself as he randomly appears at any time and place in any space-time, and each time the duration is unpredictable. What's even more troublesome is that his clothes never travel with him, so every time he time travels, Henry ends up stark naked. This forces him to learn how to pick locks and steal, just to get some clothes to maintain his dignity. As a result, being arrested by the police as a thief has become a common occurrence for him. But he never cares about it, because he might disappear the next second. Jesus Christ, this passive ability has made Henry's life a mess. To avoid being seen as a freak, he got a job as a librarian. This way, if he suddenly time travels, the vast library won't have anyone noticing. He also never dared to make friends, living every day in fear and anxiety. Until one day, he met a girl about his age, but she was very strange. Even though they had never met before, she not only knew his name but also his favorite book and the restaurant he frequented the most. Moreover, the girl said, "I used to meet you often when I was a child, you told me. We would meet in this sudden way." Although Henry didn't understand the situation, thinking of his own unpredictable ability, he chose to believe Claire. Later, the two agreed to meet at a restaurant. Then, Claire took out a thick diary. It turned out she had recorded every date she met Henry. The first time they met, Claire was only 6 years old, but Henry was older than he is now. So, the young Henry naturally didn't know Claire yet, but Claire clearly remembered the scene of their first meeting. At that time, she always liked to go alone with a red blanket to her family's avenue, where she could hunt. In the backyard for a picnic, that day, as she went to the backyard as usual, she suddenly heard a rustling sound from the books behind her. At first, she thought it was her mischievous brother playing a prank on her. So, she immediately took off her shoes and sneaked over. Unexpectedly, it was Henry. Since he had time traveled and had no clothes, Henry asked for Claire's blanket. That's how they met for the first time. At first, Claire didn't believe Henry was a time traveler, until she watched him slowly disappear before her eyes. After that, they met many times occasionally. Until Claire turned 18, for some reason, Henry hadn't appeared for a long time. Yet, even so, Claire, who had long been smitten with Henry, would still leave a set of adult male clothes at their meeting place to prevent Henry from being caught without clothes if he suddenly appeared. That diary was also a kind of love letter. Now, the graceful Claire met the young and handsome Henry in the normal timeline, and her feelings could no longer be suppressed, fully revealing themselves. Although it was Henry's first time meeting Claire, it seemed as if he was destined to fall in love with her. Thus, the two quickly developed a romantic relationship. Claire was very curious about what time travel felt like. For Henry, it was something he was used to, like waking up too quickly and feeling numbness in your limbs, or suddenly zoning out with a blank mind, and then the next second, appearing stark naked in some corner of the world. But since he never knew how long it would last, each time he could only wait silently, waiting to travel again or return to normal time. After hearing this, Claire asked if, since he could travel to the past and the future, it was possible to artificially change the cause and effect of things. Henry had tried to do so, but it was beyond human capability. As their relationship became more stable, Claire introduced Henry to her brother. Unexpectedly, her brother was extremely opposed to Henry, because for so many years, Claire had never had a boyfriend, and now she was inseparable from a man who suddenly appeared and refused to reveal much personal information. This made her feel it was quite incredible. However, she soon learned the truth. That night, she suddenly stumbled upon Henry fighting with a group of people in an alley. She originally thought Henry was in trouble and would bring harm to Claire, so she kept asking what had happened. Since they would be together for a long time, Henry no longer hid the truth. "Do I look much older? That's because I just traveled back from the future. The reason I got into a fight was that when I traveled back, I only found women's clothes, so I was mistaken for a member of the LGBTQ community and attacked by homophobes." Like many normal people, at first, her brother didn't believe anyone could travel through time, until Henry suddenly disappeared right before his eyes, and shocked, her brother immediately found Claire and told her everything he had just seen. Not only that, but he also advised Claire, "You should never marry someone like Henry. It's best to cut ties immediately." In the end, I realized I was the fool. He thought Claire must be crazy to still be deeply in love after knowing the truth. But Claire said, "Henry is my destiny. I can't escape, nor do I want to." Although he couldn't understand, her brother ultimately chose to respect her decision. Meanwhile, Henry traveled back in time and had a chance encounter with his mother when she was young. His mother was a somewhat famous musician, but she tragically died in a car accident when Henry was 6. It was around that time that Henry gained his ability to time travel. He remembers it was a snowy Christmas night, and his mother was driving him home. Unexpectedly, due to the slippery road, they collided with a truck. However, just a second before the crash, Henry's body suddenly began to dissolve, and he was transported back to a night a few days earlier. When he returned to the normal timeline, he was standing in the cold wind, watching his mother's car explode from the collision. In fact, the older Henry was also there at the scene, but besides comforting young Henry not to be afraid, he couldn't do anything or change the outcome. Just like now, he was right in front of his mother, but he couldn't let her recognize him. Even though he was a stranger in her eyes, Henry couldn't help but express his love and pour out his heart. I met a girl, and ever since being with her, my once bleak life has been filled with light and color again. Although she didn't understand why a man would say these things to her, his mother smiled and responded, "You must tell the person you love how you feel." This was exactly the encouragement Henry needed to hear. For so long, he had wanted to propose to Claire, but his unique situation made him afraid to speak up. Now, with his mother's support, he decided to be brave for love. So, after saying goodbye to his mother and returning to reality, he immediately sought out his father to ask for the family heirloom ring. Unexpectedly, his father mocked him, saying, "Who would marry someone abnormal?" Ever since his mother's death, his father, a violinist in a band, had been drinking heavily and neglecting his work, taking out his anger on Henry, blaming him for taking his wife away. But deep down, he knew his wife's death wasn't his son's fault. He just needed an excuse to escape. So, when Henry was about to leave in frustration, we will next time. He still took out the ring and offered his most sincere blessings. However, when it came to actually proposing, Henry hesitated once again. Because time travel is an uncontrollable variable, he didn't know whether an accident or tomorrow would come first. But the love in his heart urged him to place the ring on Claire's finger. Then he sincerely said, "I never feel like I can control anything, because at any moment, I am ever changing. Every time I travel, I am a lonely body. But with you, I don't feel alone anymore." Since Claire had long been expecting this day, when Henry asked if she would marry him, she said yes without hesitation. To prepare for the wedding, Claire took Henry home to meet her parents. Despite the huge wealth gap, Claire's parents were very kind. Not only did they not look down on Henry, but they also genuinely treated him as family. Moreover, since they liked hunting, especially in winter in the back hills, Claire's father invited Henry to experience the joy of chasing prey on their first meeting. Soon, the wedding took place as scheduled. To prevent himself from time traveling during the wedding, Henry planned to take some sedatives to stay calm. But before he could take them, he disappeared. His strong brother was at a loss, worried about what to do. After all, how could there be a wedding without the groom? Fortunately, 1 minute before the ceremony started, Henry traveled back. However, this time, he looked much older, with gray hair and no beard. Even though the difference was obvious at a glance, Claire, holding her father's arm, was neither surprised nor hesitant. Because she loved Henry at any moment, whether young or old, in sickness or in health, she was willing to entrust her life to this man. However, when night fell and the newlyweds were supposed to take the stage to dance, Claire found herself alone again. Just as she thought she would have to dance awkwardly by herself, the young Henry traveled back just in time. When Claire was alarmed, Henry suddenly said jealously, "Compared to the young me now, do you love the mature me more? After all, for 10 long years, you were with that version of me." Claire remembered the first morning after they confirmed their relationship, when she saw a woman's used lipstick in the bathroom, and a strong feeling arose in her heart. Because he missed the first 20 years of Henry's life, he never expected that Henry would be jealous of himself. This made him feel both incredulous and indescribably happy and sweet. Because love is exclusive, and being the most important person in a lover's heart is a source of happiness. As a shooting star streaked across the sky, Henry carried Claire into the bridal chamber, where a carefully prepared soft mattress awaited, marking a celebration meant only for the bride and groom. But just as they were rejoicing, Henry suddenly disappeared, leaving only a ring behind. Borrowing Claire's wedding night, Henry found himself in a strange forest. Seeing the clothes prepared not far away, he realized he had finally arrived at the time in Claire's diary when she was a child. Sure enough, little Claire was nearby, waiting for him to appear. Since Claire was worried her parents might divorce, Henry broke his rule and revealed things about the future. Even though your parents seem to have a bad relationship, they never actually separated, so you don't need to worry. After hearing this, little Claire suddenly asked, "Are you married? Do you have a lover?" Upon hearing the affirmative answer, she immediately became disappointed because she always hoped she would be Henry's bride. Hearing this, Henry couldn't help but laugh. When he returned to the normal timeline and saw the grown-up Claire, he teased, "I just saw you as a child, and you were very jealous of my wife." In an instant, Claire remembered that time. She admitted that she was sad for a long time and even cursed that Henry would end up with a big, bearded man, just to make herself feel better. Not long after, they moved to a new home. Henry's flaws became magnified. He would disappear without reason, and during the entire renovation, Claire had to handle everything alone. Finally, when the renovation was done and the weekend came, Henry, who was holding a tray one moment, vanished the next. This left Claire to enjoy dinner alone. He thought he could endure it, but this time, Henry disappeared for 2 whole weeks, not even preparing Christmas gifts. Claire reverted to her childhood state, waiting endlessly with no end in sight. Loneliness was gradually breaking her spirit. Clearly, this was beyond her limit. So when she saw Henry again, he couldn't help but lose his temper. However, love is precious because it contains countless acts of forgiveness between each other. Therefore, when Claire saw Henry sitting on the factory chair waiting for her to get off work, all her negative emotions vanished. Moreover, She understood that Henry, who was stranded outside, must feel more helpless than she did and was more eager to return home soon. To make up for what he owed Claire, Henry noted down the winning lottery numbers when he traveled to the future. Although this was a form of cheating, Claire accepted this windfall to ease their financial burden. Eventually, they won $500,000. After a series of selections, they bought a big house. This way, there was enough space for Claire, who loved and excelled at painting, to focus on her art creation. But when her brother's family came over for a housewarming, an unexpected incident occurred. In the living room, an older Henry who had traveled through time was shot in the abdomen, crying out in pain. However, before everyone could react, he disappeared again. They had never thought that death would truly come one day. Even though Henry could travel to the future, he didn't know when he would die. At this moment, Claire suddenly realized that besides seeing Henry in his 40s, she had never seen him older. The sunset was still casting a gentle golden light, making everything seem warm and peaceful. But in reality, it was filled with sadness and melancholy. Suddenly, Claire revealed she was pregnant. This news turned their pessimism into optimism. Perhaps, at some point in the future, Henry would be completely cured, which is why an older version of him never traveled back. However, fate seemed to always be playing tricks on them. Suddenly, one day, Claire had a miscarriage. To be precise, the child mysteriously disappeared. This made Henry think that his ability might be hereditary, and the child could have traveled somewhere else. To prevent the tragedy from happening again, he painstakingly found a genetics professor to help solve the time travel issue. At first, the professor thought he was crazy. It wasn't until he saw Henry disappear in a sealed examination chamber that he felt like he had discovered a new continent and eagerly began his research. Through instrument detection, it was found that before Henry traveled, his brain became very excited, similar to epilepsy. Therefore, they could try using anti-epileptic drugs to control the occurrence of time travel. Since Claire was already 10 weeks pregnant at this time, the professor planned to test their child's genes. Then, they planned to compare with Henry's results, but before they could implement it, Claire had another miscarriage. The doctor said if Claire had a third miscarriage, it could cause irreversible damage to her body. So, for her health, Henry advised her to give up the idea of having a child or consider adoption. But Claire was determined to have a child of their own, and no matter how much Henry tried to persuade her, she wouldn't compromise. Helpless, Henry went to the hospital and had a vasectomy on his own. Unexpectedly, when he was about to go home, he accidentally traveled back in time and met 18-year-old Claire. Seeing him looking gloomy, Claire asked what was wrong. But instead of telling the truth, Henry, feeling guilty, kissed Claire for the first time. Unaware, Claire was convinced by this kiss to wait for and marry Henry. When Henry returned to the present and told the current Claire about the surgery and the time travel, Claire was instantly furious. She couldn't understand why Henry would unilaterally take away her right to be a mother, nor why the Henry of the past selfishly planted a seed of love in the heart of an 18-year-old girl, leading her to a life where she couldn't always see her husband. This was the first time they had a heated argument. After that, they were silent with each other for a long time and slept in separate rooms. Until one night, Claire saw a young Henry who had traveled through time. Having not been intimate with her husband for a long time and always wanting her own child, Claire spent a sweet night in the car with the young Henry. Soon after, Claire was lucky enough to become pregnant again. However, when Henry learned the truth, he was both surprised and a bit uneasy. After all, he had essentially cuckolded himself. No matter who it happens to, it feels both frustrating and helpless. As the saying goes, if it comes, let it be. Now that the fact is established, Henry can only accept it. Fortunately, this time, Claire's pregnancy was very stable, and everything was fine until the 18th week. However, just as they were immersed in happiness, Henry traveled through time again. As he found clothes and was about to leave, a girl suddenly appeared and shouted at him. It turned out that it was already 10 years later, and their child with Claire was not only born safely but also grew up healthy, inheriting his ability. He could also freely control the time and place of his travels, and all of this brought Henry immense comfort. But suddenly, Alba became sad, and after some questioning, Henry learned that he would die in 5 years. Even though he was mentally prepared, hearing this news still left Henry a bit downhearted, because he really wanted more time to spend with his wife and daughter. But clearly, fate was not willing to give him this chance. To prevent Claire from falling into the same sadness too soon, Henry, upon returning from his travels, only said that their daughter would be born healthy and everything would go smoothly, without mentioning that they only had 5 years left together. Sure enough, the days that followed unfolded exactly like a script, happening without a hitch. Alba was born smoothly and grew up surrounded by love. Henry experienced the joy of being a father. Claire, on the other hand, recorded the happiness of their family of 3 with her camera every year. In the blink of an eye, Alba's 5th birthday arrived. As the celebratory music played, Henry also heard the death knell. But to avoid worrying his family, he showed no sign of anything unusual. However, 10-year-old Alba traveled back in time on this day to tell her 5-year-old self about their father's impending death. But because she was too young at 5, Alba couldn't control her emotions, and Claire quickly noticed. She was then questioned and revealed the truth. Facing death and separation, no one can truly remain calm. Claire couldn't, and neither could Henry. Even though he always pretended to be strong, the fear of death never left him for a moment. Until this day, he suddenly traveled to a freezing place, and upon returning, unfortunately, his right leg was frostbitten. Although the surgery was timely and his life was not in danger, he needed to use a wheelchair for a week. This was undoubtedly fatal, because if he couldn't run, he would be in great danger if he traveled to a perilous place. Suddenly, he thought of his daughter Alba, who could freely control the time and place of her travels, so he sought some advice. Alba said, "Whenever I sense I'm about to travel, I sing my favorite song, and that way, I can stay in place." However, this method didn't work for Henry. No matter how hard he tried, he would still unconsciously travel. And recently, the frequency of his travels increased. Perhaps it was fate, but this time he traveled to the day of his death, with the sky lit up by brilliant fireworks. And there he was, outside the door in the icy snow, witnessing his own death. Realizing time was running out, Henry began teaching his daughter to pick locks, as he believed it was the most essential skill to master over the years. As snowflakes drifted down from above, it was once again the most important Christmas of the year. Under the dazzling glow of the Christmas tree, everything seemed so beautiful and warm. Claire originally planned for the three of them to spend a quiet holiday together, but Henry invited all their friends and family. Not only that, he also took the opportunity to call Claire's brother outside when no one was paying attention. When they first met, they didn't get along at all, but now they had become the best of friends. Therefore, as his life was nearing its end, Henry felt it was necessary to say a proper goodbye to him. It turned out that tonight was Henry's last night. The reason he called everyone over was because he didn't want Claire and their daughter to face it alone when he left. The cruelest truth about time travel is that every version of you I fall in love with is the one about to say goodbye to me. In the past, there was always a chance to meet again, but this time it would be a final farewell. At that moment, several brilliant fireworks exploded in the sky not far away. Claire, upon learning the truth, held Henry tightly, unwilling to let go. But Henry vanished like fireworks in an instant. When he woke up again, he found himself in a familiar forest, with a deer behind him. Just as he realized he was in Claire's backyard, he was shot in the abdomen. And the shooter was none other than Claire's father, who loved hunting. His original target was the deer, but unexpectedly, Henry appeared and became the victim of his shot. Claire's father once said that life is a hunt. At that time, Henry jokingly replied, "Usually I'm the one being hunted." Little did he know, his words would come true. The dying Henry traveled back once more. Even though he had seen this scene long ago, when the person he loved gradually stopped breathing in his arms, Claire was heartbroken and couldn't breathe. She didn't even have the strength to respond to Henry's final confession. And so, surrounded by family, Henry, who was supposed to die on Christmas Eve at the age of 6, returned to his hometown on Christmas Eve at 46. For a long time after, Claire wandered in darkness, as if life had lost its purpose. It was as if time travel had thrown everything into chaos. Fortunately, with her daughter's companionship, she gradually mended her broken heart. She endured those painful years. Later, Claire returned to her hometown villa with her daughter because the backyard was where she first met Henry. Even though Henry had been gone for many years, she still placed a set of clothes in the same spot every day, hoping Henry would suddenly appear. They say miracles are rare, but if you believe, they will happen. When her daughter turned 9, Henry suddenly appeared in the backyard. Coincidentally, her daughter was playing with friends at the time. She immediately sent a friend to inform her mom. But as Claire rushed past the trees, across the lawn, and through the relentless river of time towards the Henry she had loved since childhood, Henry sensed he was about to disappear. Fortunately, in the last minute before leaving, they embraced once more. The golden sunlight, the red thread of fate, their mutual watchfulness, and destined marriage, this splendid market was where they would make up for their final regrets. Since Henry traveled from the time when their daughter was just born, Claire didn't understand why he didn't tell her before he died that they would meet again years later. But Henry said, "You've waited for me too long. I don't want you to spend your life waiting." What he didn't know was that, for Claire, waiting for her lover's return was also a kind of happiness. Even if happiness is brief, it's worth a lifetime of waiting. The Time Traveler's Wife is a romance film directed by Robert Schwentke, starring Rachel McAdams and Eric Bana, released in 2009. An accident in his childhood caused Henry to uncontrollably travel through time. Because the original timeline was disrupted, he felt fear, terror, and confusion. But what remained unchanged was the love in his heart. He scattered his life into pieces, laying them across his wife's life, while she patiently waited for his sudden arrivals and unexpected disappearances. After his mother passed away, Henry witnessed grief consume his father into an empty shell. He didn't want Claire to live like that after he was gone. So, he asked Claire to love herself more, to experience the world outside, rather than being trapped in the past. Regarding love, some say true love won't let you hurt others, nor will it let you hurt yourself. The most precious thing is always the person willing to walk with you to the end. In love, fleeting impulses and short-lived desires are not rare. But the most indispensable, It's about long-lasting companionship and rational endurance. It reminds me of Eileen Chang's line, "You ask if my love is worth it. Actually, you should know that love is about not asking if it's worth it." Regarding time, some believe it can change everything, and love, under the influence of time, may gradually fade or even disappear. But true love is in every moment you fully invest yourself, and that is eternity. Time has never truly changed anything. It's merely the vessel through which these changes occur. If love changes, it's not because of time, but because of the human heart. What we hold on to from the past are memories, and what leads us to the future are dreams. Love is the connection between the past and the future. It doesn't necessarily need to be explained face to face. It's omnipresent, transcending time and space, helping us preserve all the precious moments in life. Please believe that in this world, there is always someone waiting for you, just like the years waiting for the first snow. Only love can resolve the bitterness of life. That's all for today's movie sharing. Feel free to like, comment, and share. Looking forward to our next encounter.